And we are live. Welcome to this Career Foundry workshop. My name is Jakob, and I'm the engagement lead here at Career Foundry, broadcasting live from Berlin. And today with me is Jeffrey Coleman, broadcasting live from Paris in France. Very exciting. Jeffrey is one of our career specialists here at Career Foundry, assisting our students with their career change. Jeffrey, you worked in quite a few industries yourself. I read in your bio you worked in food, film, tech. So I'm very, very excited to hear your story. And today we're talking about networking. And I think we all know we need to network. We've been told we need to network at one point or another, but I think for many of us, it can be quite awkward when we stand in a room or in a webinar room right now and being asked to network and meet people. So I'm very much looking forward to learning everything we need to know about networking. And just to let you know, this is a part of a free event series. So this is event 1, learning the basics, and we'll have another 2 events happening in March and April. And we'll be sending you all the information you need about these events very, very soon. So if you have any questions along the way, just be sure to post them in the chat. I'll be back at the very end to ask them to Jeffrey. And with that, I'll let Jeffrey take it away.
Jacob, thank you so much for that introduction, and welcome everyone. So glad that you are joining us for this conversation. And before I go to the first real slide of this presentation, I wanted to take the moment to comment on the chat. Networking is all about being proactive and taking opportunities like this one to set up conversations with people. If you're seeing someone in the chat talking about, hey, I'm from Minneapolis, and you're thinking, I'm from Minneapolis too, take down their name real quick and to make a note to yourself. Don't do it while I'm talking, but make a note to yourself to reach out afterward to that person on LinkedIn and say, I saw you were at the same webinar as me. Let's schedule a time to talk next week about what we learned. Yeah, I'm sure many of you are living in the same type places, Berlin or New York and other spots. Take down people's names, find ways to connect. Great. With that said, here we go. How to network the right way. The right way. As a networking wizard, I get to tell you this is the right way to do it. But in fact, if you grew up in the 90s, as I did, you remember Reese's. There's no right way to eat a Reese's. And then they would show different ways that you can bite the chocolatey peanut butter snack. Even magical ways of zapping it, for example, which isn't really possible. But the point being, I'm not here to tell you the way, the special magical way with my wizardy wand to network. Rather, I will be talking to you about how to authentically be yourself when connecting with others. And that is going to be very different for each of you. So similar approach perhaps, but no right way. This slide intentionally left blank to remind me that wherever you are and you're listening, just hearing the word networking might put you on edge. Might have been a busy day. Just take a deep breath. Here we go. What is networking? Networking, well, can mean many different things. And I'll talk a little bit about my perspective on networking, but I want you to keep in mind that question, what is networking? And I'll come back to it in just a few minutes, but keep that question in mind for now. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am. It may be a given, but I am a human like you. And though I am lauded as a networking wizard, I have a human story. In brief, I grew up in the suburbs of Pennsylvania. As you might have seen in my bio, promoting this event. I went to school for history and English, and then I decided teaching could be very bureaucratic in a university system. And when I was in New York, I worked in a performing arts center, caterer. I worked as a test prep tutor and in a test prep company doing operations, customer service, and then wanted to learn more about technology and careers. I became a tech recruiter. I was a tech recruiter in New York for 5 years and became quite successful at what I was doing, partly because I think I did it to learn more, and I did it to help other people, and people felt that genuineness when talking to me. I learned a lot, as was my intention, and so when moving to France last year, I switched to career coaching, and that's how I've ended up partnering with Career Foundry, and I'm really happy to be getting back into the education space in that way. Hearing my background, you might think, wow, he's done so many things. He must be some kind of superhero or something. Ta-da! Well, again, just a human. We know that Superman and Batman and other superheroes, Wonder Woman, are just regular people, in fact, most of the time. And particularly, Batman is just Bruce Wayne, a human. In his case, with a lot of money. And that's not Bruce Wayne, of course, that's just an actor pretending to be Bruce Wayne. That's a photo of me when I moved to France, and you'll find that photo on most of my online profiles. I am also a real person, even if it might not seem it when you look at just a profile. And that's just something to remember whenever you meet new people. They're as human as are you. So to that point, while I do now know a lot about networking, it wasn't until I was finished with my career recruiting, when I finished with my career recruiting, that I realized I had learned how to network. Till that time, I didn't really believe it. Let's see, back in 2009, I moved to New York City. And at that time, having been someone that had grown up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, in a small town, I was used to slow conversation, not a lot happening in the woods. And I come to New York and everyone's talking fast and they have things to say and they're talking about this thing and that thing. They go into cocktail parties and they're saying, let's connect, give a business card, so suave and smooth. I'm meeting people and they're offering to, hey, anytime if you need help, get in touch. And I'm stuttering to come up with, oh, yeah, what was your name? And I was at that time not great at networking, but I also had a lot of things in my head, not feeling at ease with myself and feeling jealous that they were somehow being so suave in how they connected with their charisma or their knowing what to say. I felt self-conscious. I felt doubt that people would want to talk to me. And when I did meet people, I didn't know what to do after meeting them. I felt, oh, there's a connection there. What do I do next? So this wasn't something that I learned when I was born or learned magically in school. It's something that I learned through practice, again and again and again and again, making mistakes, and over time becoming more proficient at it. So it's something I strongly believe, that networking is a skill that you can learn through practice. I used to love reading books, as I mentioned, spending lots of time in the library as a kid, and reading history and fiction. So if anyone else out there loves books, mention it in the chat, because I can feel I'm surrounded by a bunch of book nerds like me. So I used to love reading books, and recently I went to a parent-teacher conference for my daughter and picked up a book. So we're in France, so this is a story of the Brothers Grimm. Fairy tales. I love fairy tales and these stories, and I was interested in 2,000. That's impressive number of books. I was interested in their story because I realized I didn't know it that well. And so, looking at the good old Wikipedia, I realized the Brothers Grimm, they too would never have been successful if it wasn't for networking. They grew up, I'm going to tell you their story. They grew up in Germany, the Holy Roman Empire at the time in the late 1700s, and their dad unfortunately died of pneumonia when they were very young, around 11. That put their family in poverty, and they had to like step up to the plate, be the adults, and they were very good though at working hard and learning. So they went to a school that was a really challenging school, and there was a lot of people with connections and privilege and so on, higher class status, who were at that school, but they worked very hard and they did well. So they got to go to university, and that university at that time, they didn't get tuition coverage. They were poor and not having strong social standing. It actually was given to people that had higher social standing at the time. So they didn't get the tuition paid for. They had to work really hard. They also didn't get career support. Well, fortunate for them, one of their professors was someone that they connected with, and he really liked what they were doing. He also really loved something that was growing at that time of interest in folklore and story. And the Brothers Grimm decided to collect those stories. And their professor really believed in them, kind of took them under his wing and got them jobs as a librarian and an adjunct professor. And that's when they began the real research of what they did. Later on in their careers, political instability in Germany at the time caused them to lose their jobs, and their family relied on them for money. Again, their network, friends that they had made, believing in what they were doing, because they were all about sharing and giving to others and collecting these stories. Not a profitable thing at that time, just like it wouldn't be today. Helped them get back on their feet. So I tell this story to remind you that networking is not something that's just a new thing of the 20th century, but was relevant through all of time. And even for book nerds like me and them. So I asked you earlier, what is networking? I've said I don't myself really believe that there is a right answer. That said, I would like for each of you to be thinking on this question, and what you're going to do. There's no right way. I want you to write down on a piece of paper, grab a pen or type it out in a note to yourself. What is networking to you? Expressing your feelings about it and your opinions, either based on what I was saying and what you feel maybe you've heard, or about what you have felt networking is, and that can be like a negative perception, like you think that it's schmoozing other people or using other people to get what you want. Write down what you define networking to be. I'm not judging this. We're just looking to listen and hear one another. And then, yeah, as Ebony just did, could you all, we're going to do is type it in. Don't press enter yet, but type it in the chat. Type in what is networking. Type in what is networking to you. Put in your answer. What is networking? Give you like 30 seconds to type in what is networking. To you. All right, so some people have good answers. We're gonna all, this is called the Mad Hatter exercise. We're just all press enter at the same time. So ready, go. Look at all that. Too much for me to catch, but I'm seeing a lot of reaching out to people, connecting, yes, getting on the radar, sharing experiences, talking with people that you're comfortable with, like-minded people, being willing to help others, nurturing contacts that you have over time, win-win situations, expanding the social circle can be horrifying, scary. Making friends can be tiresome, sure. This is a reminder that whatever I say after this, you have within you some wisdom about what this is all about, and that you have it also in community. All of you here now, though you can't see each other's faces, if you, as I just did, scroll up on the responses that people gave, find one that you really resonate with, chatting with the barista like that, helping others, and you could say, hey, I liked the answer that you gave. I see one of my students. Yunhee, I saw your response. I really liked that you were building connections with others as your response. Do you do that? And you can ask that kind of question. That starts a conversation, and then you set up a call with each other. So use this opportunity to learn from one another. Here we go. That said, be careful. There's just a little public service announcement. Your definition of networking might be a kind of block from getting you started or continuing to do what you were already doing. If you think that networking is something different than connecting with friends, and you've been connecting with people most of your life, but now you think you need to do networking, and that's something different, it might stop you from doing what was already working. All right, we're going to talk about 5 ways. 5 ways to look at networking. And originally, I was going to call this talk 5 birds with 1 stone. But I thought that's kind of mean to animals. So then I thought maybe I'll call this 5 different ways to touch an elephant. You know, the story of blind people touching an elephant, and one says, oh, this is an elephant. It's kind of got a long snout. Or another is saying, no, it has sharp horns. Another has this very nice tail. It's very soft. Of course, they are all talking about the same thing. But regardless of the metaphor, networking can be a little bit messy. And so I'm just going to think of it as the frame where you can put in your picture of what is networking to make it work for you. That's a good one. I like what someone said about it being a database of people in your head. Speaking of databases, many people network in order to get jobs. You apply into a database and you don't get a response. You think, I'll get a better chance of getting a job if I meet someone who works at the company I want to work at, and they kind of give me the inside room to get the job. That's not a bad way to do it. Just remember that when you're thinking about getting a job, we often think, oh, there's this job description. Do I fit it? Will people connect with me and help me? And they might not, for a lot of reasons that are outside our control and that don't reflect at all your ability as a person. When we try and network only to get a job, there's this sense that if people don't want to stay connected to you or don't respond to a message to connect, that it's because you're not skilled enough or impressive enough. So this is just a reminder to each of us that you are adequate and skilled and resilient, and whether you get a job or not, people want to connect with you. I think that networking as a way to get a job can be a great thing to do. It makes sense. That's why people do it. No worries about the accidental raise of hand. If you have questions, feel free to save them for later. We will have that after this a little bit. Avoiding the transactional approach, though, where you are only trying to use someone to get you a job can make it so that you don't yourself get treated as just a person trying to get a job, desperate, begging for a job. But if you connect with people in their fullness, asking their story, sharing your own, then you allow them to get to know you in a fuller way as well. And that can lead to all sorts of other directions. All that said, of course, you can network and it can help you get work. That's why we would call it that versus just friendship. Even today, actually, I was offered a small contract with a company that's helping diversify tech to make it more equitable when it comes to gender. And how did I get that opportunity? Through networking. I had gotten to know someone who's organized a really great journal called Are We Europe, which I highly recommend to anyone in Europe or outside Europe. Are We Europe, newspaper, magazine. I was reading it, providing context to them on my opinion as a reader, and build a connection with the editor in chief there. And then just talking with him through email, he mentioned 50 in Tech and offered to make an introduction. That introduction led to a contract. So it can certainly work, but it has to come from a first authentic place to increase your chances of it really working. Networking can also be a way to meet interesting people. That said, to do it, you have to do a little bit of research. And I'm not going to only tell my own story, but I'm going to tell you a story from my own life here again. As I mentioned, I moved to France last January from New York. And when I was in New York as a recruiter working with UX professionals, I noticed that UX research was growing as a kind of separate thing. Teams were building UX research teams as separate teams outside of design and product or underneath product, etc. But I saw that it was growing, and I love books and research, so I was very keen to support that growing community. And when I learned that there's a research ops community, research ops, here, I'll put that in the chat. They're great. And when I learned about them existing, they exist on Slack, and they also exist on Twitter. They're a global distributed community of volunteers supporting the operationalization of research in tech. And so I just promoted that community to those that I knew who hadn't heard of it, met some of the people that were key organizers in the New York area, and just let them know I really love what they're doing, and participate sometimes in the Slack. Came over to France last January, looked them back up, noticed that one of the people who'd really given a lot of time to a key project on the cheese board of this community was living in France, in Paris. I looked up her profile, her portfolio specifically, saw that she cares a lot about friendship and community, things that I care about as well. And I sent her a message through her portfolio to connect. Fortunate for me, she responded, and we grabbed lunch together this past summer when it was possible, and had a great conversation about burnout and how we were both trying to rest and not be obsessed with the next thing. Doing research prior to that lunch, I noticed that the research ops community was partnering with UX Insight Festival, which is a great UX research festival. It normally happens in Amsterdam, but was remote this past September. And I asked if I could be introduced to the director of that festival, because when in New York, I love to volunteer time in supporting events. She said, yeah, so I just dropped that in the chat. You can check it out, because it's happening again in April. Again, it will be remote. When I was supporting it remotely in the fall, I did research on some of the speakers. I was helping support on social media, and some of them I've connected with, and they're very interesting people that are from New York and moved to France, or people that are doing great work in terms of communication, UX, writing, It's storytelling, and I love stories, and connected with these different people, and some of them even connected with just recently. For the April conference, there was someone who applied who is in Austin, Texas, and is involved with the community college there that he teaches, but also in design operations. And love seeing you guys connect. This is great. And this person is named Matthew Eng, and he was applying, as I said, to a European research conference from Austin. I wondered, who is he? And when I looked at his profile, I saw not only is he working in design operations, not only is he working with this community college, and I was talking to a program through a community college called CUNY TechWorks. I thought maybe we could talk about that, but he also was a graduate of Bucknell University. Bucknell University is a liberal arts school in Pennsylvania, where my dad went many years ago. So that's what I connected with him on. I built rapport by talking about Bucknell, and when we hopped on a call last month, it was a really fun conversation. Certainly our backgrounds are not the same. Matthew Eng is coming from more of an Asian American background. He went to Bucknell for anthropology. I went to a different liberal arts school in Pennsylvania and studied history and English, and come from a mutt American background. We don't really know where we're from, maybe Germany and Ireland. And I had this feeling, though, that we really did build a connection based on just seeing that we have similar values of helping junior people find work in teams. And he, being in an operations role, is going to look into how we can do that more. And I asked if we could talk again, and he said, yeah, I would love to. So there's that feeling of, when I did my research, showed respect, and built rapport, it really works. So if you're raising hands to ask questions, we're going to have questions at the end. So please let Jakob know what your questions are. Networking can also be a way to find accountability. A lot of people that I coach as a career specialist at Career Foundry, when they start talking about networking with me, their first impression is, I need to find people at the top tech companies, people that worked at Google or Etsy or Zalando, and that's great. Or they want to connect with design managers or data directors of data science. And I think that there's a reason why they want to do that. Those people are at places that they want to go. It makes sense. But empathy, think about where they might be. If someone is in that position and they get 20 messages a month from people saying, can I pick your brain? They have work to do, and they might not feel so great about having you be another one of those people in line to just pick their brain. Versus if you connect with people that are at a similar level to you, maybe they're in a boot camp, maybe they're in Career Foundry's boot camp, maybe they're looking to start their career, maybe they just started and you just started. Find people around the same level, and you can have accountability and feeling that you're on this journey together. You can sympathize with struggles that you both had, figuring out how to learn Adobe XD, or learning how to have your first job. Connect with peers. Also, when I say network down, connect with people that maybe they're just 6 months before you. They're thinking about getting into a web development job, and you had your path of figuring that out, and now that's what you're doing. And so then you realize, hey, I could help you out because I can tell you about my journey. That allows you to process what you've learned through your journey thus far, and not feel that you're only receiving, but you could be giving too. And that's an idea behind different mentorship programs that I've helped scale, is that rather than try and find mentors in people that are more senior, try and find mentors in your peer group and help one another on the journey. Networking is a long-term thing. connect with each other. After this event, I'm seeing people connect, and that's wonderful. And as you connect with one another, don't make it one conversation where you talk about this event and then never talk to each other again. If you had a fun conversation, follow up to talk more. There was a time when I started as a recruiter, and I showed up at a career event at General Assembly. These are people that's just starting, they just graduated from the boot camp. And most agency recruiters wouldn't show up at that because companies want to hire mid to senior level people. To me, I felt differently and felt if I met people, I could advocate for them. And so I did. And one of those people, her name was Stacy, and her portfolio might not have been as impressive, but I got to know her. So a few months later, I advocated for her for a position. She got the job with one of our clients. Well, that's great. I could have left it at that. Instead, I checked in with her multiple times later, and her with me, and we'd have lunch to hear how things were going in her career, and she would ask what I'm up to, and we never worked together in a transactional way again, where I was the recruiter and she was looking for a position. But we did get to know each other at other levels, like what food we liked, and that we both cared about helping others. Now she's working on an SAP Global, a really great established company, leading women in tech in terms of being like on a panel to elevate them in their careers. Amazing. But also we've become friends and gotten to know each other at a deeper level because we've stayed in touch over 5 years. Which leads me to this last point. The networking can be a way toward friendship. Not that all networking leads that way, and we don't try and force that. It's called networking because it's professional. But let that be something that you're open to and can be surprised by. When I moved to Europe and was leaving recruitment, there was a lot of people I knew in New York that I had known in a professional way, but adjusting to life here, there were people that I knew in New York who were immigrants to New York, and now I was an immigrant to Europe, and making that connection with them at this other level where we could just talk on the phone this past year, and I could share with them what I had been going through because I had helped them in their careers, and now they were helping me process my change. So that's something to keep in mind. It can be friendship too. Similarly, if you're really good at being friends with people, treat networking that way, and it can go really well. Then you are less likely to use people if you're thinking about them as potential friends. No one likes to feel used, least of all you. And if you are treating other people the way you'd want to be treated, basic golden rule for friendship, then you're likely to be also really great at networking. So hopefully there's this question in your mind, if it wasn't there before, that maybe networking is something that you already do well. If you know how to build relationships, or you're wanting to be about building strong relationships, you're probably going to be really great at networking, and maybe you already are. So to recap, 5 ways to frame networking so it's working for you. Again, adapt this to how your authentic way of showing up in the world is. You can use it to find a job. You can use it to meet interesting people. You can network to find accountability in peers and others who are just a little bit earlier in their career journey. You can keep doing it long term, and it has great payoff if you do. And who knows, sometimes you might even make some friends. Have I persuaded you? Have I convinced you? Personally, I don't think it needs to be that you were convinced by this presentation, because if you remember at the beginning, when 12 years ago, when I had first moved to New York and felt a lot of self-doubt and felt jealous of others who were seeming to have a lot more soft skills in terms of how they connected with other people than I did at the time. And I didn't know how to figure that out. It's not that I wasn't aware that networking is a thing that people do. It's not that I wasn't aware that connecting with others is good. It's that I hadn't done it a lot because I'd grown up in a smaller place where it wasn't as necessary. And it was again and again and again over many years, practicing meeting new people, figuring out ways to follow up, figuring out ways to make connection with people different from me, figuring out ways to build rapport, practicing again and again. That's what persuaded me that networking is a great thing to do. And it wasn't about my head, but about the action that I took. So, personally, what I've seen in terms of human behavior, action more important than what we believe. So, if you're already networking in the chat, which I'm loving to see, and if you've been doing it for years, keep doing it. If you start tomorrow, don't give up right away just because it gets hard. Keep doing it, and you will get better and better and understand more and more how it works. So we're going to have a Q&A in just a minute. But before I field your questions, if you would, please answer in the chat, what is one thing that you learned or are curious about investigating more? One thing that you heard today that's sticking with you. Something that when I was putting it a certain way or telling a certain story, or when I was telling my own story, or the Builders Grimm story, something that you learned and or something that you heard and want to look into more. Can you share that in the chat? Love it. Love to learn more about the right way to send that initial message. You're in luck, Charlotte. That is what the next webinar at the beginning of March will be about, among other things. Building rapport, that's something we'll also talk about then. Yeah. Brothers Grimm, keeping in contact is friendship, being more authentic, just being normal, exactly, keeping at it. That's right, Elizabeth. Networking is a way to build meaningful relationships. Love it. Alam said, although I'm still not sure how to build rapport, there must have been something earlier. Building rapport, yeah, learning about that and realizing there's still much to learn. Wonderful. And then if you've written that, one thing that you've learned and or are curious about investigating more, please also share with me and everyone here, what's one thing sticking with you that you already knew before, but that hearing it a second time, the repetition helped you get it stuck in your brain a little bit more. Something that you already knew about networking and you're realizing, I already knew that. Great. Put that in the chat as something that now that you know it at a deeper level, hopefully it sticks now all the more from this conversation. What's one thing sticking with you? Yeah, a lot of good answers here. Yeah, and if you've been taking notes on who you want to connect with, keep an eye out for their name. Maybe it will give you a kind of seed to grow next time you talk. Maybe you were wanting to connect with Alexa or Melanie, and you saw, oh, they wrote networking needs time. Knowing how to network more consciously and just being yourself, and then you can say, "Hey, that was great. Now that we're connecting and going to talk later this month, let's develop that more. Why is that something that you learned or know already?" Great, yeah. Being persistent, confidence. Don't just be begging for work. Wonderful stuff. So much wisdom in this group. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. And if you haven't yet typed it in, you're finishing that up, feel free to add to what we see in the comments. A lot of really great input. Thank you also for listening to what I had to say here this evening or afternoon if you're in a different time zone, or later in the night. And I hope that it was of value to you. Let's do some questions. Love to hear what you have to.
And I'm back in the room.
Say in terms of things that you could use clarification on or questions on things related.
Jeffrey, can you hear me?
Welcome, everyone.
Jeffrey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Great. I wasn't sure. So yeah, thank you for presenting. This was really fantastic. We have quite a few questions. So I'm just going to start with a question from Maria. How useful is it to add people to a network like LinkedIn without having much in common? In this case, we have Career Foundry in common, but is it useful to have connections all over the world with people you might talk to once to connect, and that's it?
Yeah, so I'm going to guess a little bit at the meaning of that last part, in that the ideal is that you connect with people and you have further conversation. But just like not all networking leads to friendship, not every time will you connect with someone and then it turns into this rich conversation that goes on and on. It might be that you just have a little bit of a connection, talk a little bit right now, and then it doesn't go anywhere for a while. You kind of just let that sit there. It might be that 9 months later, you can have that rich conversation with that person. There's a reason to connect deeper. That happens to me often. So it's okay to just start and then let that go till later. And then I think the first part of that question was, how do you try and find connection when it might be a little more difficult, like if it's just Career Foundry or if you don't even have the Career Foundry connection? Do a little bit of research. At the very least, there might be something that you can build rapport on after you get talking with them. So just letting them know a little bit about yourself, why you want to connect, and then setting up a talk. So that in that larger context, if you open with, I love to start this conversation by the two of us sharing our story, you'll begin to get some other material. And it's my belief that we all have something in common with one another.
So what you're saying is that we should be more selective about who we invite to our network on LinkedIn and maybe find out more about who these people are?
Kind of a both and. On LinkedIn, be more selective, as that's going to increase your chances of authentic connection. But also sometimes it is a platform where people are just sometimes just clicking connect. And that might be all that happens. Then you just say, hello, nice to meet you. And that's okay too, it being that kind of platform, because later it might lead to something bigger. So kind of both and. I think they both play a part in networking.
Great. And continuing on the topic of LinkedIn, a question from Anna. Do you have any tips for networking on LinkedIn for introverts? What are the best ways to frame your request to connect? And maybe we could expand this question and talk about people who are introverts and obviously find it very difficult to speak to other people and open up.
Yeah. I consider myself an introvert. When I've taken the personality tests through my life, always what shows up. I think that we can move that at least when I've taken the test at other points in my life. Sometimes it's changed, but it's knowing in an extra. There's a book, The Quiet Quiet Revolution, but the book is just called Quiet, by Susan Cain. That was very inspiring for me, and I recommend it to anyone that considers himself an introvert, because it empowers you to realize, while we're in an extroverted world where people can say networking is easy for them because they're being suave and connecting with people because they just know what to say and love, introverts, often we might be shy, but we care about paying attention to little details. We care about listening. We care about connecting one-on-one. And that also can be networking. And for someone who is more extroverted and loves to talk, they might not be as good at it. So just resting in your strength and being able to feel that kind of confidence, that inner confidence that says, I may be an introvert, but I have the strength. And the second thing is practice. You might feel anxious and shy the first time and feel it's really hard. Find little ways to begin. Message, make it more of like a game for yourself. Message a bunch of people, or trying to set up one call before the end of March with someone, and take a lot of notes on that conversation, and then build on those baby steps.
That's great advice. And I think here at Career Foundry, for your student already, we actually have this virtual coffee Slack channel. So I would encourage you to join, because it's a real pleasure to meet other students. And still on the topic of LinkedIn, how much time do you spend on LinkedIn and other social media for networking every day? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, that can depend. That can depend a lot on what stage of life that I'm in. I would encourage, like I said, about it being a long-term thing, not to only network when you're looking for a job, but to continue meeting new people even after you start in a new job. What happens a lot on platforms like LinkedIn is people that once they get established, then they don't go on it. Well, then people that are looking have no one to talk to help them. So being willing to give back at those periods. At the same time, in an era where social media addiction and screen time is really important to be mindful about, I want to be wary to recommend anyone to be on there more than they need to be. Try to pop on regularly and be deliberate about what you do. It can be a very distracting platform, and you can end up going on there to connect with people and then just end up reading the feed or notifications and feeling like you're not great at this. So to that point, be mindful in the use. When I was a recruiter, I was on there every day and became a power user because it was my job. But I've seen people use it very effectively without going on all the time.
And would you recommend to become this premium member on LinkedIn if you're looking for a job or you're open to networking?
If you're in an intense time of focused use of the platform because you're looking for a job, for example, yes, I would say that you can get a month free, for example, and it's not so much money to be a premium member. It elevates your profile. More people see it just automatically. They flag it to be seen by more people. It also allows you to be more visible to more people. And there are other features as well that you can use that help you find others to connect with. So I would highly recommend that if you're in a focused time of networking.
We have a question from Son Gui. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. How to get connected with people who have high position in your dream company on LinkedIn, but I wonder if we could maybe extend this question to, I don't know, going to an event, for example, a talk, and maybe introducing yourself. So how do you connect with these people that are, I don't know, CEOs or heads of departments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll put the caveat at the beginning that I did say those type of people are the people that get hit up the most. So try to think about going broader than that, and then work your way up is a better mentality, because if you then actually know people that know them, you're much more likely to be able to connect than if you just go for them directly as your first kind of reach out as a networker. But if you have been doing that, building your network wide and deep, and then you're wanting to reach out, I had people actually, some of you maybe attending, reached out to me prior to this event and said, Jeff, I'd love to connect so that you're going to be speaking. That's a wonderful thing to do. Before an event happens, reach out to someone that's going to be speaking and just compliment them on the topic and that you express interest. Following up after is less likely because it's going to be cluttered, their inbox at that point. So be proactive. Another thing to do is if they are in that level of position where they're a manager, a lot of people make requests of them. Instead of making another request and being that person in line asking for something, be someone who adds value. So think about what they could use. Maybe look at their profile. Maybe they have a blog and they write on it and you appreciate something that they said. Compliment them on that. Say that you read it. Show that you had read it by making some kind of remark about a point in the piece that was in the middle of the piece. Notice what they're interested in. Perhaps you know about an event where they could be a speaker. Suggest an event or a podcast where they could elevate their profile. So you're helping them. They're much more likely to respond to those kind of messages if it doesn't seem like you need something from them.
Fantastic, thank you. Just as a side comment about how much time you should be spending, Emily has a great advice. Don't install LinkedIn or Facebook on your phone, and that will stop you from spending too much time. And that's definitely right. I uninstalled Instagram and Facebook from my phone because I was spending too much time.
Agreed.
How about this question? How do you network during the pandemic? So obviously, hopefully, this won't be forever. Mm-hmm. But I think it's still a valid question, no? How do you network online?
Yeah. It's a very valid question. To the question earlier about introverts, one advantage is when you're online, this can sometimes play to introverts' advantage versus an extrovert who's used to working a room, going around and charismatically shaking hands and getting into circles to talk to people. Now we're all in this place of social media and online connecting, and that involves usually less of a time frame of it needs to be during a big conference where you go and shake a lot of people's hands and get face-to-face interaction. Now, anyone that is available online, because not everyone has a LinkedIn profile, for example, is someone that you could connect with, and you can connect with them at a time that suits you. So being thoughtful in how you reach out and noticing how you feel and letting that authenticity come through and how you connect with others. If you realize this is a difficult time and I've been a bit overwhelmed, use that as a connecting point with another person where you thoughtfully put down a message that wouldn't eat into their time or make their day more of a drag, but rather gives them something more lively, encouraging, hopeful, and that you put thought into. How often do we get thoughtful messages from strangers? I am the person leading this webinar, and I can say that in the past year, I've gotten 3 thoughtful messages from strangers, and one of them became a friend here in France, and the other 2 were certainly people I appreciated exchanging with. So it's rare even for people that are, we could say, well connected, and so be thoughtful.
So it just seems that you just basically need to spend some time researching topics.
And then be persistent. That's the other thing. If you know, but not like annoying persistent. In a pandemic, you don't want to be hitting people up because they didn't respond to you this week. But you also want to recognize that with everything changing all the time, people are going to sometimes feel really overwhelmed, even if they're, quote, successful in their career. And so you might have sent a message that they honestly just were so overwhelmed with the changes that they missed it. And so if you only send the one message and then think, I guess they don't care about me, that's wrong. It's very, very likely now. The numbers are a lot higher. It was true before and will be true again, that people are sometimes just busy, but with the pandemic, people are more likely to be stressed, and so just be persistent to send another message, politely saying, hey, the night you saw my message from a few weeks ago, but still would really like to connect because, and then reiterate the reason.
And on that topic, what are some good questions to start a conversation, whether it's, and again, online and in real life?
Yeah, I'm seeing one in the chat. Lunch Club is a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful tool, platform for connecting. They've really designed it well, and it's we could say pandemic friendly in that it automatically matches you with other people with your shared interests, and you can do it every week. It's free, and using Ariana's invite code, or I have an invite code, and many others on the platform that have had positive experiences can send you invite codes to get on. And then that's one wonderful thing. Of course, LinkedIn. Of course, yeah, Clubhouse is another good one. These kind of events is always a good space, remote events, particularly ones that maybe seem to have less buzz. If it's a smaller group, even better chance. And Slack groups can be wonderful, and Facebook groups. There's really no limit to what kinds of communities could be beneficial. Though what I will say is, always worth joining one. And then if you're finding that people are using that particular watering hole to just promote themselves or just share links with no words, maybe don't invest a lot of time in that group, but in ones where it's a generous community of people asking good questions and helping one another, spend more time in those groups.
And about spending time, how do you maintain a relationship after getting to know them and after connecting with them? This is a question from Zoe.
Yeah. March 4th. We'll go into that in more depth, but in a short minute answer, it can really depend on all the specifics of that initial conversation of why you connected. But one thing I find when people are asking that kind of question is they have a doubt about their own value. They think that they're networking to help themselves because that's in the back of their head. But if they did it well, they built rapport with the other person. They asked them their story, they shared their own, they asked good questions, they got good answers, they asked good follow-up questions, and they wrapped it up nicely. And you might have felt like you got a lot out of that first conversation, and you know in the back of your head that that's what you're hoping for. So you're thinking, why would they want to talk to me again? Like, how do I keep this conversation going? I don't want to tell them that I need them again. Believe that you have value and that it was mutually beneficial. And you can start from that point for continuing the conversation of just continuing to give them something valuable. And of course, people want to stay in touch with others who are helping them. And you know that you're being helped, but you also can know that you're being helpful.
And I think we have some time for the last question, and I think this one is quite relevant. What are some of the faux pas in a multicultural networking meetup, and how to deal with them? Do you have any don'ts? We heard about a lot of do's, but what are some of the don'ts of networking?
Yeah. Good. Let's be prescriptive here at the end. I really do. I think that it is important to emphasize some don'ts. I mentioned in passing, do to others what you would have them do to you. Is that like golden rule for just relationship building in general? So a big don't for me in terms of networking is if you don't like people who are when it comes down to it, you realize they're making it really obvious that they just want to use you to get something. don't do that to other people. Don't make it so obvious that that's what you want to do. Or even better, don't do that. Don't be just using other people. Even if you feel like you really need and feel kind of desperate for a connection and network, it's much better to say to someone, I'm so glad that you've been willing to meet with me, and that I'm going to be honest, I think it's amazing that you're at said company and have a lot of questions for you, but I'm just going to be transparent and say, like, I'm feeling so much like wanting to get help from you. And when you say those words out loud, it helps you kind of check what you're doing, and then you realize, wait, what am I doing? And you can kind of change it to be about just getting to know them as people. And similarly, it allows them to say to you, yeah, well, I don't have all the answers, and no one does. So you don't want to be trying to use other people, because also they can't always be the one to help you with exactly what you need. So that would be my second point. Don't expect other people through networking to give you exactly what you need right now. Networking is something that helps so much in a career, but it helps in a way that is a little organic. You don't always know exactly how someone's going to help you. You connect and you build real connection, and then it leads to fun surprises over time.
Fantastic. And with that, I just so Jeffrey mentioned the next event, and I just want to finish with that. So after this presentation is finished, you'll be redirected to a landing page with the details for the next event coming up on March 4th. So you can book your spot right away, so you don't forget. And with that, I want to thank you, Jeffrey, for sharing your story and teaching us all about networking, or not everything, but the first chapter. And thank you all for participating, for sending your LinkedIn addresses. And I wish you good morning, good evening, wherever you're based. And we'll see you next time. Jeffrey, yes. I hear you typing.
Yeah, just hang in there. That I look forward to seeing you all for talking more. If you felt like we didn't get to things in terms of like the tactical stuff of networking, that's what we'll be doing in March.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for joining us, and see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.